Nikki Haley defying calls to drop out of the Republican presidential race, despite polls showing Donald Trump with a massive lead. The former South Carolina governor rallying supporters in her home state ahead of the next major contest, which is there on Saturday. Haley vowing to keep fighting until at least after Super Tuesday on March 5th and blasting Republican politicians who are loyal to Trump.
Well, I'm not afraid to say the hard truths out loud. I feel no need to kiss the ring. I have no fear of Trump's retribution.
Meantime, Trump landing in South Carolina today, holding a fly-in event near Greenville ahead of a televised town hall event tonight. The latest polling average from our partners at 538, look at that, showing him beating Haley in that state 63% to 33%. So to break all of this down, we bring Rick Klein, ABC News political director, back in here from our D.C. bureau. Rick, does Nikki Haley have a path if she doesn't win South Carolina, or even, frankly, if she doesn't do well in South Carolina?
Not a direct path, no. I don't know of any scenario, and I don't think her campaign could even point to one, that has her overtaking Donald Trump in the delegate lead if she doesn't win South Carolina and then do very well on Super Tuesday 10 days later. Now, the path that does exist might be there to be as kind of a backup plan to hang around in case something happens to Donald Trump or in case further legal jeopardy imperils his nomination in some way. In the meantime, she can accumulate delegates. But the only way to beat Donald Trump is to actually beat Donald Trump. And if she doesn't do that in South Carolina, I don't see how she starts doing that somewhere else.
So, I mean, we're all familiar with the kind of expectations game, like the closer you get to a primary, campaigns start to come out and say, well, actually, this would be a win for us, or this would be a win for us. If we do this, it would be a win. Is the Haley campaign managing expectations? Are they not doing that? And what are they saying is a win for them?
They're not putting specific targets on it, Jay, but what they are saying is they expect to do as well or better than they did in New Hampshire. Now, of course, New Hampshire was just the two of them running at the time. She's not going to come in worse than second place. But remember that there was a lot of talk about her closing that gap in New Hampshire. It ended up being in the low double digits in the end. She has to at least do a lot better than that to be in serious contention. But, you know, it's interesting because for all the talk about her dropping out, the donors haven't really been putting a lot of pressure on her. She still has money. She still has the resources. And she still has a lot of people that are saying, look, you have to do what you can to stop Trump because they believe, if for no other reason, that Trump is the worst candidate for Republicans to put forward against President Biden.
So Michigan comes after South Carolina. Super Tuesday comes after that. Does it get harder for Nikki Haley as the map goes on?
It gets really stubborn because of how quickly the states start to cascade upon themselves. Big states like California and Texas are on Super Tuesday, and by the end of the night on Super Tuesday, you're almost halfway home in terms of the full number of delegates. The Trump team believes that they are basically a mathematical certainty by that point, or not long thereafter, and it becomes hard to mount a national campaign. Look, the stars have aligned such as they ever will for Nikki Haley in South Carolina, her home state, this 4-week gap between major contests, and the world and international events that have put Donald Trump on the defensive. If all of those things can't get Nikki Haley back in the game, then I don't think it's going to start right after that.
And Rick, even if she gets trounced by Trump, can her attacks on the former president, in your view, have an impact on him in a general election?
Sure, and I'll tell you, the Biden team would like to see Nikki Haley run as long as possible because of the weaknesses that it exposes. But look, if Donald Trump runs the table, he wins all 50 states and all the territories, it's really hard to talk about a fractured or divided Republican Party, particularly when you compare to the fractures on the Democratic side. I do think some of the things she's saying now will be recycled as general election attacks, but keep in mind how many Republicans have said awful things about Donald Trump in the past, only to come back on board in the end. And even today, Nikki Haley, in making this case against Trump, made clear that the problems she has with Joe Biden are much bigger and much more important than any of the disagreements she has with Trump.
Rick Klein, I've said this before, I will say it again, one of my favorite people in this universe. Rick Klein, thank you for your time, sir, on this Tuesday night. I want to turn now to our big story panel. Joining us is ABC News contributor and Sirius XM host Mike Muse, another one of my favorite people, ABC News contributor and former Republican congressman from New York, John Katko. I'm not going to rate everyone as we go through. Democratic strategist and president of Next Gen America, Christina Simpson, and ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the LA Times, LZ Grandison. Welcome you all in. Thank you so much. John, first to you. What do you view as Nikki Haley's strategy here? What does it need to be? And what happens to her campaign if she doesn't perform well in South Carolina?
Well, I think she's always said that she's going to be in this race at least through Super Tuesday. If you look at it, South Carolina is hardcore right and the Republican Party. That's not really what is going to bring her home. What's going to give her a chance is how she does on Super Tuesday. That's her last hope, I think, and her best hope. That being 9 out of the 15 states have non-affiliated voting. So if she pull off a few upsets there and get it and keep it close, then I think she's got a shot. After Super Tuesday, if she gets swept in Super Tuesday, of course, that's a real problem. But I don't think South Carolina is going to be her Waterloo. I think Super Tuesday is going to be.
To the great Christina Simpson Ramirez now, I want to turn to the Biden campaign in a way. You heard Rick mention it. Do these attacks from Haley onto Trump help the president right now?
Well, there is a significant portion of the Republican Party that feels disaffected by Donald Trump. You had a significant a portion of the electorate that saw themselves as Republicans last election voting for Biden. And, you know, I don't agree with Nikki Haley on most policy fronts, but I've got to give it to her. She has had the guts and courage to stand up and be in this race when most other men and Republican candidates backed out. And so, yes, it does weaken Donald Trump, especially for those most independent and moderate voters within the Republican Party that more and more start to really hear the attacks on Donald Trump coming from Nikki Haley and the reasons not to vote for him again.
When you talk about Republicans disaffected by Trump, I think I heard John Katko, former Republican member of Congress, go, but I want to turn. John, you don't get to answer that because I want to turn to LZ.
Oh, yeah.
I want to, well, thank you, John, but I want to turn to LZ here because age is something that Nikki Haley talks about a lot, LZ, as you know. She talks about how she is younger than both Trump and Biden. In your conversations with voters, do people view age as a primary concern of this campaign, or is it overblown?
You know, it's an interesting question because to answer it, number one, yes, in my reporting, age is brought up a lot. But here's the reality. Who are they voting for in the primaries? Age. So the American people themselves seems to be somewhat conflicted in the sense that it's brought up a lot. It is a huge concern for both parties, and yet both men who are both going to be well into their 80s as president are leading the votes. And so it's hard to actually extrapolate what's really important because how people talk about age and how they vote about age aren't necessarily congruent.
It's interesting. That's a good. I want to take that to Mike, actually. Mike, so you heard LZ talk about how it doesn't bear out in the polling. In the primaries, do you think you hear voters start to talk more about age as we get closer to the general and people start to think in this election year mindset that some Americans might not be in right now?
Yeah, but first, Jay, I want to say, I think I can speak on behalf of all of us. We love you. Hashtag one ABC News.
Valentine's Day is over, Mike.
Mike wins. Going to break. Mike wins. The panel's over. Nothing more. No, go ahead, Mike. I'm forgetting.
I think when it comes to the age question, both of these candidates, presumably it will be former President Trump, are roughly the same age. Only 3 years separates them. Jay, I really think what America is trying to say from a nuanced perspective is that we're more interested in terms of term limits. I don't think it's just about the age of Biden as Trump, but I think it's about the aging senior leadership on both parties that are in control of the House and of the Senate. I think what America is expressing, but it's so binary, they blame it on Biden and Trump, is that as a society, they're asking for more term limits so we're not in a position where you get to senior leadership who's been serving 30 plus years, to which then age becomes an issue. I think it's more so what they're trying to say is about term limits, but we just haven't had that expanded vocabulary to talk about that enough.
I kind of want to build off that and toss Christina somewhat of an oddball question, but it relates to general election issues. Christina, the White House, as you know, has been making repeated mention of the fact that Republicans are stalling aid for Ukraine, that former President Trump's statement about Navalny didn't reference any kind of thing about Vladimir Putin in it. Do you think those general election attacks from the White House have staying power this year?
I mean, we're in such a tumultuous time. What we know is there's going to be some core issues that are going to come up where Republicans, not just on those issues, are really unpopular. Abortion's going to come up this election, where they stand on democracy. And then those two issues, they were a driving force last time that really stopped a red wave that Republicans thought they had on lock. And it's really going to be up in the air what happens this election again on those issues particular.
And Jay, if I can add on to that, what Christina is saying, I think that's when it goes to your first question regarding the role that Nikki Haley can play. If she stays in it long enough, the primary comes to a conclusion, her attacks against former President Trump will bode well more with independents who think more about geopolitical issues from more a geopolitical nuanced perspective of understanding.
That's a fair point.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.